You know that feeling when you're arguing with a friend about what a song really means? Or what the author of a book was actually trying to say? Well, back in the day, a group of thinkers came up with a way they thought could settle those debates for good. They called it new criticism, and their idea was pretty radical. Forget the author, forget history, and just focus on the words on the page. It was an idea that totally changed the game. So let me just ask you this right off the bat. When you're reading a poem, does it matter what the poet intended to say, or is the only thing that really counts what the words themselves are doing on the page? This very question is right at the heart of the whole puzzle that New Criticism tried to solve. Okay, so to really get why this idea was such a big deal, we got to rewind the clock a little. Because before the new critics showed up, figuring out what a text meant was, well, it was a total mess. I mean, interpretation was all over the place. Critics would bring in everything but the text itself. Seriously, they'd talk about the author's weird childhood, the political drama of the time, or even just, how the poem made them feel personally. Pretty much anything was fair game.
And you can see the problem here, right? If meaning can come from the author's diary, or from some random historical event, or even just the mood you're in that day, then how could we ever agree on anything? It made studying literature feel kind of wishy-washy and subjective, more like a guessing game than a serious field of study.
So, right into the middle of all this chaos comes this new group of critics, and they had a solution that was honestly kind of genius in its simplicity. Just ignore everything else and focus on one thing: the words on the page. These folks, who we now call the new critics, they wanted to make literary studies way more rigorous, more objective. They actually argued for a science of criticism. They wanted to build a discipline that didn't run on feelings or guesswork, but on cold, hard evidence, the kind of evidence you could point to right there in the text itself. Their huge central idea was something called the autotelic text. Now, that sounds fancy, I know, but it just means that the work of art is its own self-contained thing. Think about it like a beautiful vase. You don't need to know the potter's life story to appreciate its shape and design, right? For the new critics, a poem was exactly the same. Everything you need is already right there. And this is where they really shook things up. They said the author's intention is irrelevant. Two of the big names, Wimsatt and Beardsley, even gave it a name: the intentional fallacy. Their argument was pretty simple. First, how could we possibly know what was going on in Shakespeare's head? And second, even if we did, who cares? The work has to succeed or fail all on its own. So if you're throwing out the author and history and all that other stuff, what are you even left with? How do you analyze anything? Well, the new critics had an answer for that. They developed a super powerful method that became their signature move: the art of close reading. Here's how it works. First, you put the text under a microscope. You completely isolate it from everything else. Then you start dissecting it, looking at all the little pieces, the metaphors, the rhythm, the word choice. But here's the really clever part. You actively look for tensions, paradoxes, ironies, moments of ambiguity, where the text seems to be fighting itself. The whole point is to show how the work magically resolves all these little conflicts into one single unified meaning. And this process was intense. So intense, in fact, that the poet T.S. Eliot kind of jokingly called it the lemon squeezer school of criticism. And that's the perfect image, right? The goal was to squeeze every single drop of meaning out of nothing but the words on the page. Now, I know this all might sound a little abstract, but these ideas were actually put to the test in this amazing real-world experiment that perfectly shows what the new critics were all about. So picture this. It's the 1920s at Cambridge University. A critic named I.A. Richards decides to try something. He hands out a bunch of poems to his students to analyze, but there's a huge catch. He stripped away all the identifying information. The author's name? Gone. The date it was written? Nope. Any historical clues? Wiped clean. The students were forced to deal with just the raw material in front of them, the poem itself, and nothing more. So what was the point of all this? Richards wanted to see what would happen in a pure reading experience. He wanted to study that direct connection between a reader and the words on the page, without all the noise of reputation or history getting in the way. It was the ultimate test of the new critical approach. New criticism absolutely dominated literary studies for decades. And while you don't find a lot of pure new critics these days, its footprint is still everywhere in the way we're all taught to read. So why did it fade? Well, later thinkers came along and said, hey, wait a second. You can't just ignore history and politics. A text doesn't exist in a vacuum.
And that's a fair point. But, and this is a really big but, the one thing that absolutely stuck around is its single greatest contribution, that powerful, fundamental skill of close reading.
I mean, you can't overstate the impact. Before the new critics, nobody was systematically digging into the language of literature with this kind of focus. They're the ones who taught generations of us how to pay incredibly close attention to the words, and that skill is still the foundation of how literature is studied today. So, I'll leave you with a final thought. The next time you pick up a book or even just read an article online, take a second and ask yourself, what am I really focusing on here? Am I looking at the words on the page, or am I bringing in that whole cloud of outside context? The answer might actually surprise you.